Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa Rasulullah. We continue reading from Imam Al-Ghazali's Jawahir al-Quran al-Durr, the Juz of the Quran in Spares, and back to Surah Al-Ankabut, the spider. We have been reading and commenting on the story of, in the very last session, on the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim, Prophet Abraham alayhi salam, and we only touched upon Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam, where in verse 28 he addressed his people, reprimanding them, revoking them for engaging in acts of homosexuality. And the Qur'an is very clear. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم ولوطا إذ قال لقومه إنكم لتأتون الفاحشة ما سبقكم بها من أحد من العالمين أئنكم لتأتون الرجال وتقطعون السبيل وتأتون في ناديكم المنكر فما كان جواب قومه إلا أن قالوا ائتنا بعذاب الله إن كنت من الصادقين. And remember when Lot rebuked the men of his people, you certainly commit a shameful deed that no man has ever done before. Do you really lust after other men, abuse the travelers, and practice immorality openly in your gatherings? Openly is not in the text. وَتَأْتُونَ فِي نَادِيكُمْ الْمُنكَرَ. But obviously, if they do it in their own gatherings, and by the way, the word nadi, it is really the social gatherings. It's the same word they used for clubs today. His people responding by saying, of course, they were sarcastic, they were mocking Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam, bring Allah's punishment upon us if what you say is true. And of course, his response was supplicating, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to support him to against corruption of his own people. قال ربنا انصرني على قوم مفسدين. Lot prayed, my Lord, help me against the people of corruption. Now, there are contemporary attempts to interpret the story of the people of Lut alayhi salam as a problem of lack of hospitality, denying that homosexuality was the problem, or if there is homosexuality, that it is not condemned. First of all, there are other instances mentioned in the Qur'an. For a clear instance, here it's not clear about the lack of hospitality. They were definitely not hospitable. The story of towards the end of Surah Al-Kahf, where Prophet Moses approaches the Khidr, the man who had direct knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wanting to learn from him. And there were 3 incidents. And each time Prophet Moses, peace upon him, rejects the immediate action because he had no knowledge really of from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like Al-Khidr himself. One of these stories, the very last one in fact, is that they go to a village, a town, and they ask people for hospitality to feed them, and they refuse. Nevertheless, they find a falling wall, a wall that was about to collapse, and Al-Khidr erected it properly. So here we have, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this story punish that people with any kind of punishment? No, no. Okay, that's the first issue. The second issue is that it is clear cut that Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam, he could have mentioned the lack of hospitality, he could have mentioned anything other than homosexuality. Here it's very clear. إنكم لتأتون الرجال. You uh, here it might be translated as you lust after other men. It's not lusting only, because to lust in itself, okay, it's just like, let's say, lusting, a man lusting after a woman. So it's lusting after a heterosexual relationship. It is still haram to implement, to take practical steps to, despite the fact that we talk about a heterosexual relationship. It has to be marriage, a man and a woman, fulfilling the conditions that the marriage will be public. There is a dowry, there are witnesses, but here it's about men, basically having sexual relations with men. It's very clear. They have other problems, obviously. Here they were like highway robbers. وتقطعون السبيل. And they perform shameful acts in their gatherings, immoral practices. They cross other red lines. But the very first thing, إنكم لتأتون الرجال. Now, in 2003, there was a book edited by Hamid Safi from Duke University. In that book, the title is Progressive Muslims, so that says it all, really. We talk about people who classify themselves as progressive, which effectively means people who give up part of the faith, people who give up part of the Islamic worldview. That's very important uh, to realize this. One of the articles there was by Scott Kugel. He named himself Scott Siraj al-Haq. I think, of course, he graduated with a PhD from Duke University itself. And in that article, he drops the verses such as this one from the article, arguing that Islam does not prohibit homosexuality. So you see the methodology. He dropped the verses that straightforward, that they make, that they definitely make the case that the punishment of the people of Lot was about homosexuality. Lusting, thinking, that's while one should not think about crossing red lines, but if you think, that's different from just somebody who thinks about robbing a bank. It's different from actually robbing the bank. In fact, legitimizing something that is absolutely haram is worse than the person who just simply say that, for example, wine is absolutely prohibited. If someone does not drink but legitimizes uh, alcohol, that's worse because it would make the that behavior more appealing, more acceptable. The fact that there are people who do something does not make it right. In another book that Scott wrote, he wrote that about 15 queer Muslims, even if it's really 1500. That's not really, you don't argue about the Islamic worldview by the number of people who cross, red lines within that religion. 2003, that's, remember, that's really within a couple of years of uh, September 11, and many Muslims in the West wanted to present themselves as progressive, which really, in a sense, distancing one from the Islamic worldview, one way or another. I did, out of courtesy, my colleagues at Florida Atlantic University at Wilkes Honors College invited me to interviewing professors, a shortlisted professors who could have been recruited to teach Islam, Middle East studies, and I attended one in which someone from a Muslim background made sure that the present professors um, understand that despite his Muslim background, the name, the country, he made sure that they know that that he lived in France and that he's a wine connoisseur. That, yes, that's really part of the story, seeking to be accepted by giving up. So this is really exactly when we talk about liberal, liberated from what? Yeah, any liberal person in any religion, not only in Islam, is someone who gave up part of his or her faith. It is prohibited. It is one of the worst things. Imam Al-Ghazali argues against it, that if you take it into an extreme, that's the end of humanity. You will not be able to reproduce. They say today, for example, that you need, even if all people remain within heterosexual marriages, man and woman, if they don't reproduce, they say 2.1 at least, or even more, the society will not reproduce itself, and then the numbers will become in the negative. So with homosexuality, this is the end of humanity. If all people, just simply for the sake of the argument, if they follow this logic. And if you pay attention, they were the first They were the first, the Quran says, to commit this grave sin. ما سبقهم بها من أحد من العالمين. No one. The punishment that they asked for was on their way, on its way. On their way were the angels responsible for punishing the people of Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam. And on their way to the people of Lut alayhi salam, they passed by Sayyidina Ibrahim, and they brought him the good news. The good news, of course, we mentioned this before, the birth of Isaac. And in fact, the good news was in double: Isaac, and after Isaac, um, Jacob, meaning a grandson. And and it is the case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised this family, promised Ibrahim alayhi salam and Sarah, that they will have a child, and this child will become an adult, guaranteed, with the old enough to get married, which means he cannot be the subject of the test of the sacrifice, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guaranteed that this boy will not be, his life will not be jeopardized in any way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised that there will be a son whose name is Isaac. He will get old enough, he gets married, and he will have a son of his own whose name is Jacob. So when they passed by Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, and of course, in different contexts in the Quran, in one context he brings them a fat, about بعجل حنيذ, بعجل سمين. In two different contexts. In one case, it is fat, in another it is roasted. But they refrain from eating in the Old Testament. They do eat, and of course their number, three in the Old Testament. Here we don't have a number in the Quran, the number of the angels. They it becomes in Christianity they take it as a sign to support the notion of the Trinity. There is no link, of course. So they tell Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam that they will destroy the people of this village. We know that the talk here is about Sodom and Gomorrah. إن أهلها كانوا ظالمين. For his people have persisted in wrongdoing. Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam argued, قال إن فيها لوط. He said, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, but Lot is there. They responded, we know best who is there. We will certainly save him and his family except his wife, who is one of the doomed. قالوا نحن أعلم بمن فيها لننجينه وأهله إلا امرأته كانت من الغابرين. So they, of course, they know who is there. They tell him that they will save, Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam will be saved, a righteous prophet. وأهله, the part of his family excluding his wife. And the one might ask the question, why? Why his wife was doomed? And Wallahu Alam, and God knows best. It's because she approved what the people there did. So it's very all those people who today will say, well, then, I cannot interfere in what people's choices, and they might still socialize with them, they still accommodate them and befriend them, and when they commit grave sins. إنا منزل على أهل هذه القرية رجزا من السماء بما كانوا يفسقون. We are certainly bringing down a punishment from heaven upon the people of the city for their rebelliousness. They were rebellious, but really, fisq here is we talk about immoral, illicit sexual acts, and in particular, we talk about homosexuality in addition to the other prohibited acts that they used to perform. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala how many things they used to do in their gatherings, that all of them were haram. After the punishment, وَلَقَدْ تَرَكْنَا مِنْهَا آيَةً بَيِّنَةً لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ. And we did leave some of its ruins as a clear lesson for people to understand. The area of the Dead Sea on both sides, so most probably we talk about the eastern shores of the Dead Sea, and there are studies there. We don't deny, we don't approve, but some of the studies there show that there is a sulfuric content, meaning that the stones that they were hit with, it's just like burning with sulfuric content. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ala wa alam. So Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam and the part of his family who were saved, it was because they were faithful, they were moral. Thus they were saved. In the Old Testament, and I have to say this for comparison, Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam is saved along with his two daughters, adult daughters. And the two daughters start saying to each other, without Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam being informed, that there were no men in the vicinity, and that they plotted, and they gave their father wine, and while he was intoxicated, we talk about a prophet of God, and we talk about if we don't have details about the two daughters, أهله, okay, it's his family, excluding the wife. And let's assume that really the number of the girls is true when we talk about haven't they just been saved from that general punishment because of their morality? Their mother perished because of her immoral position. And they say in the biblical narrative that there were no men, and they gave their father wine, and the first night, the older daughter, she slept with her father, talk about incest. And the second night, it was the younger daughter. And in fact, there's talk about the Moab, for example, being the offspring, the Moabites being the offspring of the older daughter, for example. This is absolutely unacceptable. We reject this. No prophet would do such a thing in the Quran. This is not the only problematic story in the Old Testament, as is And this is why we believe that these previous revelations suffered from the vagaries of transmission. They were altered one way or the other. This is where the story of Sayyidina Lut and his people ends. Of course, there are other details, but from different contexts. And in the next session, inshallah, we begin with the story of Midian with and their brother, the Prophet Shu'aib. Until then, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.